All right, today we're grabbing our intellectual shovels and digging into one of the most influential and, yeah, controversial maps of the mind ever created. We're talking about Sigmund Freud's foundational model of the human psyche.
So let's just start with this one big question. What if the thoughts, the desires, the memories that really truly drive you are operating completely outside of your own awareness? It's a pretty radical idea, right? But it is the absolute bedrock of Freud's entire framework.
And Freud's answer was basically this. Your mind is like an iceberg, or as we're looking at it here, a pyramid. That tiny little tip at the top, that's your conscious awareness. That's what you know about. But the enormous hidden base, well, that's the unconscious. A powerful, unseen force that's shaping pretty much your every move.
And this quote, it just perfectly illustrates how he saw his own work. You see, Freud was a massive collector of antiquities, and he saw a direct parallel there. He really believed the job of an analyst was to excavate the mind, to dig through all these layers of defenses to find the, quote, valuable treasures buried deep down inside. So let's start our dig.
Our first layer is what Freud called the topographical model. Now, you can think of this as his first draft, his initial sketch of the mind's different regions, all based on how easy they are for us to access. So, this map breaks the mind down into three distinct territories. Right at the very top, you've got the conscious. That's literally whatever you're thinking about right now. Just below that, there's the preconscious. And way down at the bottom, you have the massive, sprawling unconscious.
So, what's the actual difference? Well, the preconscious has everything that's available to your consciousness, but just isn't there at the moment. You know, like your memory of what you had for breakfast, or the lyrics to a song you haven't heard in years. That tip of the tongue feeling, that's you, rummaging around in your preconscious. The unconscious, though, that's a different beast. It holds stuff that is actively kept away from you because it's just too painful or too threatening. We're talking repressed memories, primal urges, deep-seated fears.
But here's the thing. The unconscious isn't a perfect prison. Sometimes its contents leak out. And that's what we call a Freudian slip. You know, when you say one thing but mean another? It's supposed to be an unintentional error that reveals a hidden, unconscious thought. It's like a momentary peek into that vast hidden world that's operating beneath the surface. Okay, let's move on to the next layer of our dig. As Freud's theory grew, he started to think that these mental regions weren't just empty spaces. No, they were actually inhabited by three competing entities. And this brings us to his famous structural model. And here they are, the three main characters in the drama of your mind. First up, you've got the id. It's totally unconscious, and it runs on the pleasure principle. It's basically your primitive instincts, just demanding, I want it and I want it now. Then you've got the superego. This is your internalized moral compass, and it operates on the perfection principle. It's kind of like the voice of your parents in society, full of shoulds and should-nots. And finally, there's the ego. We'll get to that in just a second. And yep, caught right in the crossfire is the poor ego. The ego operates on the reality principle, and its job is basically to be the CEO of your personality. It has to negotiate some kind of compromise to satisfy the id's crazy desires in a way that's realistic and also morally acceptable to the superego. And your personality? It's pretty much the result of this constant internal negotiation. And this is a great way to see how the two models overlap. The id, as you can see, is completely submerged down in the unconscious. But the ego and the superego, they have parts in the conscious, preconscious, and unconscious realms. And what this does is create an incredibly complex inner world where our motivations are almost never simple or fully understood.
Okay, so how do these elaborate structures even get built in the first place? For that, we have to dig way back into our own origin story, to what Freud believed were the most important formative years of our lives, our childhood.
Freud came up with this theory that our personality develops through a series of what he called psychosexual stages. Each stage is defined by a different part of the body that becomes the main source of pleasure. So, for example, in the oral stage, it's all about the mouth, feeding, sucking. A little later, in the anal stage, the main conflict shifts to control and toilet training. Freud argued that how we handle these early experiences basically lays down the blueprint for our entire adult lives. And the key idea here is something called fixation. The theory goes that if a child's needs are either way too frustrated or way too indulged at a certain stage, their development could kind of get stuck there. For instance, Freud thought that really harsh toilet training during the anal stage could lead to a fixation, creating an adult personality that is obsessively neat and stubborn, what we still sometimes call anal retentive.
So, as our excavation starts to wrap up, what have we actually found? Let's take a look at the artifacts, the Freudian concepts that have really survived the test of time and have become a permanent part of our culture and our language.
I mean, just think about how normal these words seem to us now. We talk about someone being defensive or in denial. We totally get concepts like sibling rivalry or narcissism. We even use the word ego all the time. Whether we realize it or not, we are all speaking Freud.
You know, it's such a fitting final artifact for our dig. The man who saw psychoanalysis as a type of archaeology was himself an obsessed collector. He owned over 2,000 ancient objects. For Freud, the parallel was crystal clear. Just like he was unearthing treasures from lost civilizations, his work was about unearthing the hidden treasures of the mind. And in the end, his own ideas have become cultural artifacts for us to find.
So what it all really comes down to is this. While so many of Freud's theories have been debated, changed, or even thrown out entirely, his impact is just undeniable. He gave us a brand new vocabulary, a new map to explore the huge, hidden continent of our own minds. So the real question isn't whether you agree with him, but whether you can now see just how deeply his language has shaped the very way we understand ourselves.